My girlfriend applied for our dream house, put her name only on the application despite my $80,000 down payment. I found out just before closing. I said, "Interesting paperwork," when I refused to transfer the money and the deal collapsed, and then 29, male, had been with girlfriend, 28, female, for 3 years. We met through a mutual friend, bonded over our shared ambition, and eventually decided it was time to stop renting. We wanted a house with a yard, a garage, somewhere permanent to actually start a life. I am a software engineer. I make good money, and I've spent the last 6 years living well below my means, skipping the flashy cars and expensive vacations. Because of that discipline, I had accumulated a little over $110,000 in liquid savings. Girlfriend works in marketing. She makes a decent salary but has significant student debt, a slight shopping habit, and practically zero savings. When we started discussing buying a house, the financial division of labor was obvious. I would provide the entire 20% down payment and cover all the closing costs. She would contribute equally to the monthly mortgage payments moving forward. It seemed entirely fair to me at the time. We were building a future together, or so I completely believed. The house hunting process was completely spearheaded by her. She insisted we use her sister's husband as our agent. Let us call him Realtor. Realtor was a smooth talker who drove a leased BMW, wore suits that were always a little too tight, and constantly referred to me as brother or boss. I was absolutely swamped with a massive product launch at work, pulling 60-hour weeks and barely sleeping. I trusted them to handle the groundwork. I let girlfriend and Realtor tour the properties during the day. They would send me video walkthroughs, and I would give a thumbs up or down from my office. Then they found the one. It was a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb, listed at $400,000. The videos looked fantastic, freshly painted with new fixtures. The market was incredibly hot, so Realtor told us we needed to move fast before someone else scooped it up. We waived the inspection contingencies because Realtor assured me he had personally walked the property with a contractor buddy and swore up and down it was pristine. I signed the initial offer electronically from my phone between meetings. My $80,000 cash to close was ready and sitting in my checking account. The next 30 days were a blur of bank statements, pay stubs, and endless emails from the mortgage lender, a guy Realtor heavily recommended. Every time I asked a specific question about the title or the loan structure, girlfriend would wave me off, rubbing my shoulders and telling me Realtor was handling all the boring stuff, and I should not stress because I was already working too hard for our future. 3 days before our scheduled closing, I was working late at my home desk when an email dropped into my inbox directly from the title company. It was the final closing disclosure, the master document detailing every single cent of the transaction, alongside the preliminary deed. I opened the PDF, intending to verify the wire transfer instructions so I could hit the bank the next morning. I scrolled down to the borrower information. It listed girlfriend. Just girlfriend. I paused, rubbing my eyes, thinking I misread it. I scrolled down to the warranty deed, the legal document that actually proves who owns the physical property. The grantee was listed solely as girlfriend. My name was completely absent from the title, the deed, and the mortgage. Yet, on page 3 of the closing disclosure, right there under the cash to close section, was a strict requirement for a wire transfer of $80,000. From my bank account, I reread the 50-page document 4 times. The silence in my apartment felt incredibly heavy. I printed the entire packet, laid it out across the dining table, and sat in the dark waiting for her to get home from her celebratory dinner with mother and Realtor. She walked through the door around 10 p.m., carrying a half-empty bottle of wine and a massive, self-satisfied smile. She dropped her purse, came over to the table, and saw the papers spread out. She laughed, casually tossing her coat on a chair, and said it was just a lot of legal jargon, but we were closing on Friday, and I just needed to make sure I wired the funds before noon tomorrow. I looked up at her and said, "Interesting paperwork. My name isn't on the deed." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but she recovered with practiced ease. She launched into this fast-talking, rehearsed explanation about how realtor and the loan officer figured out that because of my lack of recent credit lines, her credit score actually secured us an interest rate that was 0.25% lower. She claimed it saved us thousands of dollars in the long run, so they made an executive decision to just keep the loan in her name for now. She put her hand on my arm and promised we would absolutely file a quitclaim deed later to add me to the title. She said it was totally standard practice for unmarried couples. I pull my arm away. I told her that a quitclaim deed later did not explain why my $80,000 had to be handed over right now for a house I technically wouldn't own. She immediately got defensive. Her voice pitched up, and she accused me of not being a team player. You make 3 times what I do. You can afford this. Stop being so greedy, she snapped. She asked why I was making this a huge deal, accused me of trying to back out at the last second, and said I was ruining our special milestone over a clerical technicality. I looked her dead in the eye and told her I was not wiring the money. Period. The explosion was absolute. She started screaming at the top of her lungs. She accused me of having deep commitment issues, of trying to financially abuse and control her, and of humiliating her in front of her family, who had worked so hard to find us this house. Within 10 minutes, my phone started ringing, buzzing on the table. It was Realtor. I sent it straight to voicemail. Then Mother called. I silenced it. I calmly packed a weekend bag, told her I was staying at a hotel, and walked out while she was still yelling about how I owed her this house. Sitting in the hotel room at 2 a.m., the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. The better interest rate excuse was absolute garbage. You can easily have someone on a property deed without having them on the mortgage loan. Anyone who has spent 5 minutes researching real estate knows that. I opened my laptop and went to the county property tax assessor's website, which is a free public database. I typed in the address of our so-called dream house. The current owner was not a regular person. It was listed as an LLC. I copied the LLC name, went to the Secretary of State's business search portal, and pulled the corporate registration. The registered agent and sole manager of the LLC was Uncle, her mother's brother. I sat there staring at the glowing screen as the pieces snapped together with horrifying precision. Uncle was notorious in their family for terrible financial decisions. He thought he was a real estate mogul, flipping houses, but he always ran out of money and left them half-finished and facing foreclosure. Realtor had told me this house was turnkey. I had waived the inspection specifically because Realtor swore it was pristine. They were selling Uncle's distressed, underwater property to girlfriend at a massively inflated price. They were actively using my $80,000 cash to bail Uncle out of pre-foreclosure, paying a massive, unearned commission to Realtor, and leaving girlfriend with sole ownership of a house funded entirely by my life savings. It was not a clerical error or a simple misunderstanding. It was a highly coordinated, family-wide extraction of my wealth. The next morning, the dirty tricks and the sheer entitlement went into overdrive. I woke up to an urgent security alert from my bank. Someone had attempted to log into my mobile banking app from an unrecognized IP address. It failed purely because I had two-factor authentication enabled. An hour later, I got a frantic, wildly entitled text from girlfriend. She demanded I send the wire immediately because the title company was threatening to cancel the contract. She said I was punishing her after she had given me her prime years, claiming I owed her this stability. She ended the text by threatening to call a lawyer and sue me for palimony, stating we practically had a common law marriage and a judge would force me to pay up. I live in a state that explicitly does not recognize common law marriage whatsoever. She was bluffing, desperate to force my hand before the closing window shut. But attempting to access my bank account to potentially wire the money herself crossed a massive, unforgivable line. I skipped work and drove straight to my bank. I closed my checking and savings accounts entirely, got a cashier's check, moved every single dollar into a brand new account at a completely different financial institution across town, and changed every password I owned. Then I called a cutthroat real estate attorney. I sat in lawyer's office and laid out the title documents, the county records showing Uncle's LLC, and the threatening text messages. Lawyer reviewed the paperwork, nodding slowly, and then he caught something I had completely missed. "If your name isn't on the loan," lawyer asked, tapping his pen on the desk, "how did the lender account for the $80,000 in cash coming from your personal account?" Under federal banking regulations, a lender requires a strict paper trail for large deposits. If it is coming from a third party, it has to be legally declared as a gift. A cold chill went down my spine. I looked at him and said I never signed a gift letter. Lawyer picked up the phone and called the title company, formally identifying himself as my legal counsel. He requested the complete underwriting packet, specifically demanding the source of funds documentation. 2 hours later, a secure fax came through to his office. It was a standard Fannie Mae gift letter. It stated clearly that I, the donor, was giving girlfriend, the borrower, the sum of $80,000. It explicitly stated that no repayment was expected or implied, framing it as a pure gift out of love. At the bottom, right next to her actual signature, was an electronic DocuSign stamp, with my name perfectly printed on it. Girlfriend had forged my signature on federal mortgage documents. Lawyer set the paper down, took off his glasses, and told me this just escalated from a messy breakup to multiple federal and state felonies. We were now looking at textbook wire fraud, mortgage fraud, and undisclosed dual agency by the real estate broker. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel sad, heartbroken, or nostalgic anymore. I just felt a deep, overwhelming need to absolutely dismantle everything they had built on my back. I told him to drop the hammer on all of them. No mercy. We spent the afternoon drafting the fallout. First, a formal withdrawal of my funds from the transaction, citing fraudulent documentation and forged signatures. The deal was officially dead in the water. Second, we drafted a massive formal complaint to the State Real Estate Commission. We detailed realtor's blatant failure to disclose his familial relationship with both the seller, uncle, and the buyer, girlfriend, while acting as an undisclosed dual agent to facilitate a fraudulent, overpriced transaction to secure a commission. Third, lawyer compiled the forged gift letter, the IP login attempt proof, and the LLC records tying the property to her family. He forwarded the entire packet directly to the fraud investigation department of her mortgage lender. Finally, because my name was the only one on the lease for our current apartment, lawyer drafted a formal, legally binding 30-day notice to quit. Friday arrived. Closing day. I obviously didn't show up at the title company. At 1 p.m., I unlocked the door to my apartment. Girlfriend, mother, and realtor were all sitting in my living room like they owned the place. They looked furious, arms crossed, practically radiating entitlement. Realtor stood up immediately, stepping forward aggressively and demanding to know where the heck I had been. He dropped the friendly brother act entirely. I did all the legwork for this. I earned that commission, and you just cost us the deal. You're just a keyboard pusher who got cold feet, and now you lost the earnest money. Mother chimed in right behind him, pointing a manicured finger at my chest, calling me a selfish, manipulative little boy who broke a sacred promise to give her daughter a home. You owe her for wasting her time, she shrieked. Girlfriend was crying, but there were no actual tears falling. It was a purely theatrical performance. She ordered me to fix it, demanding I call the title company right that second and tell them I would wire the money by Monday morning. I didn't say a single word at first. I just walked over to the kitchen counter, opened my leather briefcase, and pulled out 3 thick manila envelopes. I handed one to each of them. Girlfriend asked what it was, her tone still completely demanding and arrogant. I looked at them and calmly told them the first page was the county tax record proving uncle owned the garbage house they tried to force me to buy. The room went completely, terrifyingly silent. Realtor's face drained of all color. He suddenly looked like he was going to be physically sick. I looked directly at girlfriend and told her the second page was the gift letter she forged my signature on, which had now been officially submitted to her mortgage lender's fraud department. I let her know in a very steady voice that she would never qualify for a mortgage again in her life, and she would likely be hearing from federal investigators very soon regarding the wire fraud. Mother gasped loudly, her hand flying to her mouth. Girlfriend physically dropped the envelope on the hardwood floor. Her fake, theatrical tears instantly vanished, entirely replaced by pure, wide-eyed panic. I turned my attention to Realtor. I told him the third page was a copy of the complaint my attorney filed with the State Real Estate Commission that morning. He failed to disclose his relationship to the seller and the buyer. He pushed a lemon property to secure a fat commission and bail out his wife's uncle using my money. I informed him his broker in charge was also copied on the email with all the evidence, and his license would likely be suspended by next week at the latest. Realtor opened his mouth to speak, to try and spin his way out of it, but absolutely nothing came out. He just stared at the paperwork, his hands physically shaking. Finally, I looked back at Girlfriend, pointing to the last document sitting in her pile on the floor. I told her it was a formal 30-day notice to vacate my apartment. If she wasn't completely moved out by the end of the month, I would file for a formal eviction, which would go on her public record permanently and ruin whatever credit she had left. Mother started screaming wildly, completely losing her mind, threatening to call the police and sue me for emotional distress and breach of contract. Realtor didn't even try to defend himself or calm her down. He just turned around, walked out the front door without a word, and practically ran to his leased BMW. Girlfriend fell to her knees, begging, apologizing profusely, and completely throwing her family under the bus. She cried that she was pressured into it by mother and uncle, that it wasn't her idea, that she loved me. I just stepped right over her dropped envelope, walked into my bedroom, and locked the solid wood door behind me. Over the next 6 months, the consequences hit their family like a runaway freight train. Without my money to bail them out, Uncle's LLC defaulted on the loans, and the bank foreclosed on the so-called dream house, ruining his remaining credit. Realtor's broker fired him immediately to distance the agency from the massive scandal, and the state board suspended his real estate license pending a full, very public disciplinary hearing. Girlfriend had to pack up all her things and move back into mother's cramped basement. She ended up having to drain whatever tiny funds she had left to hire a very expensive criminal defense attorney to deal with the fallout from the forged federal documents. I kept my apartment. I kept my money. I realized that trust is not something you blindly hand over, no matter how much you care about someone, because sometimes the people closest to you are just waiting for the exact right moment to bleed you dry. If you want to know how to spot a forged signature before your in-laws steal your life savings, hit that subscribe button down below because it is a whole lot cheaper than losing 80 grand.